Hey everyone, welcome to another interesting conversation broadcast on G News. Today we're lucky to be joined by Camilla Belich, who is Labour's Justice spokesperson, and we're going to have a conversation about the risk of undermining our trust in government decision making and a few other things. Specifically, this is about the need to audit the communications in the Prime Minister's office surrounding what we just saw with hard copies going unrecorded and being sent to Matt Burgess, who is Christopher Luxon's senior policy advisor, or he was, and this is involving Z Energy and Fonterra. You all know the story. Welcome to G News, Camilla. Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're most welcome. Camilla, you've called on the need for the Auditor General to run an audit here while we actually have two other existing investigations going into this issue. You've described those investigations as being valuable but not impartial. Could you explain what has happened and what the investigations that we currently got will cover and what that might mean for us?
Thank you. Well, this is a really serious matter. As listeners may be aware, there were documents that should have been made available under an Official Information Act request that weren't by the Prime Minister's office. And the only reason that they became public was through a court order. So that's very unusual to have what we would normally see as official information not be provided through those official channels. And those who've kind of had a look at the request will see that there's a decent timeline in there showing various meetings that were held around this court case that has been taken. And the reason I requested the Auditor General look into this is because we know that I think almost there were calls for an inquiry, but almost off his own bat, the Ombudsman has decided to look into the particular provision of information. And so that is very helpful and that's appropriate. But I think last week you would have seen, just before I put in this request, the Ombudsman stating that they won't go into whether they're looking any further or whether it's just the particular withholding of information in question that they are looking at. And so I don't think that's really enough on its own. If the Ombudsman had said that they were going to do a fulsome inquiry into the processes and procedures that occur in the Prime Minister's office, then I think that would have been really helpful. But what we've seen is that they haven't gone as far as to say that. So the Auditor General is the audit office of government. They look to any spending and processes that government has in place. They do annual reviews of most of these departments. And in this case, I thought that there was a specific example that indicated a lack of proper process that was put in place. And I think because the Prime Minister's office is of such important democratic, constitutional importance to New Zealand, that the public really need to be assured that the Prime Minister's office is maintaining proper records and complying with the obligations that the Prime Minister's office has as an organisation that's subject to the Official Information Act and also the Public Records Act, because this is not just a matter of the day-to-day politics, it's actually a matter of national record as well. So that was the reasoning for the request for the Auditor General to step in and provide a fulsome audit of this particular office.
Great. The DIA investigation, what's the scope there?
As far as I'm aware, the DIA investigation, you may have heard the Prime Minister say that he'd asked ministerial services to remind their employees of their obligations, and all ministerial advisors are technically the employee of the Department of Internal Affairs. So very much kind of a reminder to do better in the future. I don't see, as far as I can work out, and then they may be looking into that specific individual who was involved in this particular instance. I haven't checked to see whether that's the case or not. That will obviously be open to them to do that, but certainly ministerial services are a part of the Department of Internal Affairs. The Department of Internal Affairs answers to the government of the day. The Department of Internal Affairs answers to the Minister of the day, in this case the Minister is Brooke Van Velden, this is not a organisation that can independently audit the Prime Minister's office. And so that is why the Auditor General, I believe, is in a much better position to independently conduct an audit of whether their processes are fit for purpose. And of course, if there are any recommendations, that would go to this Prime Minister's office, and I would assume would be taken up by future Prime Minister's offices as well. So I think it goes towards making sure that we can have confidence in our democracy and that these proper processes are actually in place, no matter who the Prime Minister is, but especially in this particular situation, there is an urgent need to ensure that for this particular Prime Minister's office.
So if your call to the Auditor General isn't heeded, are we in danger of allowing unsound practices to continue unseen?
We just don't know, and I think that in itself is problematic. So we don't know if the Prime Minister's office, apart from this example, has processes in place and procedures in place to ensure that their legal obligations are being adhered to. We do have an example in this most recent case that points otherwise, and I don't think the public has any independent assurance that this couldn't or isn't happening in other examples and other meetings that are happening with PMO, and that is why I think the only way that we can really be truly assured that it isn't continuing to happen is through having an independent audit, having those assurances. Either it's everything's fine or things need to be changed, and if things need to change, that those are implemented as soon as possible, because otherwise this particular example is over a year ago or longer than that in terms of the some of the advocacy. So it could be that things are happening now and we don't improperly happening now, and we're not aware of them.
You talked about controls and how the Auditor General could look at the controls in the PMO's office. What kind of controls are we talking about?
Well, I guess it would be things like the way that they accept information from external sources and put those into place as part of their internal record keeping is one of the ways that we could look at the different controls to make sure that there are checks to ensure that that's happening. So it's not just told to someone once or told to all staff at the beginning of their induction at the beginning of a parliament, and then you've got staff changes or people get promoted or people get demoted, and it isn't raised with them, and then that ongoing accountability would be really important. So those are kind of two examples of controls that they could put in place.
If we don't really reassure the public properly here and do the full job, do the full audit, what happens to perceptions of the integrity of the Prime Minister's office?
Well, I think that is a hugely important question, and I think the public perception at the moment, if you're a member of the public and you have seen what's happened, you were right to be concerned that there could be practices that are not perfect, that are not accountable under the Official Information Act or the Public Records Act. And so I think that in and of itself is a damaging perception. It's not only damaging to this particular Prime Minister and his office, but it's also damaging to the faith that New Zealanders have in our democracy. People need to know that everyone is, the law applies to everyone. No one is above the law, and unless we have these assurances and there are consequences for serious breaches like we've seen in this situation, then I don't think the public can have that assurance.
What are some of the questions that Labor have at the moment that may still be unanswered here ahead of all these investigations that we are hoping will be answered as a result of looking into this?
Well, I think there's questions around what training was put in place for people who are in receipt of this type of information from outside organisations, what process and procedures in place are there, and guidance is there in terms of making sure that information is disclosed when it's should be disclosed. To what extent does the Prime Minister's office actually look behind the obvious in terms of information that's available? I mean, it could be that they're doing a very light touch disclosure. I don't know. And so that would be a question that would be good to know the answer to as well. The other things that we don't know, and we obviously you would have seen Chris Hipkins question the Prime Minister in the House about that. He was not forthcoming with information on that. We don't know to what extent, who knew what, when, and what information was available before these very key decisions were made in relation to bringing in this law. We also haven't seen this new law. We don't know to what extent it will align with the advocacy that has been made by private organisations to the Prime Minister's office, and to what extent that's been influenced by those outside organisations. And that's partly to protect these officers, is partly why we have the Official Information Act, why we have disclosure of ministerial diaries, why we have these transparency measures in place. But in this case, those measures either haven't been complied with or haven't been enough to give the public confidence that there isn't anything untoward happening in relation to influence in the Prime Minister's office.
The decision to put a ban on climate tort claims in law made by this government, can you comment on why this was really not a very wise decision and what is wrong with how that may be being applied before, for example, this case is even finished, and the retrospective nature of it?
It's a really awkward thing for me to talk about for a few reasons. And one of those is, as a Member of Parliament, usually you wouldn't be commenting at all on something that was before the courts. And even as an opposition, spokesperson for justice, this is something I feel really uncomfortable about, because I don't believe it is proper for members of the legislature or the legislative branch of Parliament to actually be commenting on matters which are part of a different part of our constitution through the courts. Usually we make the laws and the courts interpret them and implement them. But in this case, we're having a very complicated process where this case has been going through the courts for a period of time. We're obviously aware through what we've just been discussing that there's been advocacy to prevent that, and we actually don't have a final decision. So I think that it does not bring this current government, it does not reflect well on this current government that we're even having a conversation about a judgment which is still yet to be finally determined in the court. So that in and of itself, regardless of whether the case should be able to go ahead or not, is hugely concerning, and I think reflects really poorly on the process that has been undertaken to date. And it's really unfair for New Zealand citizens to feel that if they take legal action which they're entitled to, that there's a chance the government might step in and prevent them from doing that at a later stage. That's concerning in and of itself.
In a nutshell, what will Labour do about the situation if you are elected into power?
Well, we haven't seen the legislation at all, so it really will depend on what the government actually does. Maybe it's that they've seen that this is reflected badly and they're having second thoughts about that. So we will need to see what they actually do, but certainly this is not how we would behave when a court case is in place, and certainly it's something we'll need to really look at in terms of the stage of that particular case and overall whether it affects this particular case or wider tort law. I don't know exactly what the legislation will say, but certainly something that if it's still ongoing we'll need to look at really, really urgently, and certainly not the way that we would behave.
Okay, moving on to some more general kind of topics. How are things feeling inside Labour at the moment and out and about on the campaign trail?
Oh, well, you be aware that we made a policy announcement last week on a fee cap for public transport. It was really well received. We've been out and about. I was at a market in Auckland on the weekend, and lots of really positive feedback for this. I think people can understand how it's going to directly help them in terms of making sure that they've got more money available to spend on other things, and also being able to budget, which I think is something that maybe can be overlooked by people who are not really living paycheck to paycheck, but just knowing that you can put $20 aside, that's going to be your transport costs if you use public transport exclusively for the week, can give people a lot of confidence to make other choices. So, maybe make trips that they wouldn't have, to see friends and family, stay connected, do more of the things that, make life worth living rather than just commuting. That will also give them the opportunity to do that too. So yeah, we've been really busy talking about that policy, and it's been really well received.
Yeah, it has been, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I just think finally, how would you sum up the need for a proper audit of the communications around the PMO in this specific case, and any other messages that you'd like to convey to the audience to take away today?
Well, I think there does need to be a fulsome audit. This is a serious situation. The government has stopped or is intending to stop a legal case in its tracks. We don't know to what extent that was influenced by external information provided by external parties, and there's been a failure to disclose that at the appropriate time. So there needs to be some action, and I've suggested the Auditor General is the most independent public body that could do that as part of its work in order to provide New Zealanders confidence that the processes are being followed in the Prime Minister's office.
Camilla Belich, thank you very much for your time today, and all power to you in the rest of the election campaign.
Thank you so much.
Welcome to G News, the good news.